Hi, sir. Welcome, and thank you for taking your time to speak with us. The Supreme Court order that had earlier barred three NCERT academics has now been withdrawn. What was your immediate reaction when you learned about both the ban and its reversal?
So the initial reaction about the ban, which is on March 11, when the Supreme Court passed that order, the Supreme Court bench, was a reaction of surprise because, first of all, we had not been heard. And this was an ex parte order, technically, that's what it's called. So we are not asked to present our view. And in view of the severity of the order, the Supreme Court bench itself called it harsh during the last hearing last Friday. In view of the severity, the fact that this kind of ban is unprecedented, as far as I know, in India's judicial or educational history, the fact that it had definitely a chilling effect, intimidating effect with all institutions. So that was certainly surprising. We were confident that it would ultimately be removed because what we could see is that the Supreme Court had been given only a very small part of the picture. It was not aware of the context. It was not aware of the mandate under which we were working, a very clear, precise mandate, which is the National Education Policy of 2020, NEP 2020, and the National Curriculum Framework for School Education of 2023. These two foundational documents, if you like, define very clearly the mandate of our work. The Supreme Court was absolutely unaware of it. Lastly, it had asked NCERT to supply our credentials. Well, it asked NCERT to be more precise, to identify those responsible for the chapter, the offending chapter, if I may call it that at that time, and to provide their credentials. Now, NCERT very kindly supplied our three names without giving the mandate under which we were working, without giving the broader context of two overarching committees that were mandated to prepare, finalize those chapters, etc., and without giving our credentials. So basically, the Supreme Court bench was kept completely in the dark as to the real context in which we were working. So we were confident that once we explained this context, the Supreme Court would, at least to some extent, recall its order, at the very least, the ban under which we were, which was imposed on us. And that is what happened. The full order of March 11 was probably not recalled. I have not yet studied in detail the order which appeared on Monday evening, I think, on the Supreme Court website. I am not yet to study it in great detail, but the ban has been removed, and some of the remarks that the bench passed on us were also removed, but maybe not all. Be that as it may, it's been a surprise initially, but we were confident that the order would be at least modified.
The now removed Class 8 NCERT Social Science textbook for Class 8, Part 2, had a chapter on the role of judiciary in our society, which had a subsection titled Corruption in the Indian Judiciary. That subsection formed the basics of the controversy. What was the purpose of including this topic in the school textbook?
Well, that is, in a way, that is the whole question. And that is what, in fact, NCERT should have tried to answer, but did not. So it was left to us, those who had, especially myself and Mr. Alok Prasannakumar, who had worked on the chapter, because the third person, the third accused, if I may use this word, maybe not a very appropriate word, but anyway, the third person that NCERT pointed its finger at, was actually not concerned with the finalization of the chapter. So she should never have appeared in this list of names. But let's say that Alok Prasanna Kumar, who is a very competent legal expert, and myself as the person who was looking at all the chapters, I was getting more involved in some, for example, those dealing more with history or culture, and less in others, particularly those actually in governance and democracy, what is used to be called political science earlier. The point is that we had adopted the perspective of NEP and NCFSE, and that perspective imposes on us that we should develop the critical mind of the student, engage the students, stimulate the students' independent thinking right from the beginning of the middle stage, that is, say, grade 6 onward. And if you're not bringing to the students real-life discussions, some of the challenges that our country, the world is facing today, tomorrow, even more so, then you are not doing justice to NEP 2020. And much more so, you're not doing justice to the student, because you are taking the student for a fool. You are assuming that the student is unable to think for himself or herself, and that and that they have to basically continue to be passive sponges, absorbing anything that we adults decide is appropriate for them, and that they're just there to swallow things and regurgitate them on the day of the exam. That is the old system, the bane of school education, especially since independence, in fact, has been that. If it had not been like that, there would not have been a need for the national education policy in 2020. So therefore, we obeyed the mandate. And if you read the NCFSE, National Curriculum Framework for School Education 2023, we are mandating to discuss the challenges that India is facing in the 21st century. How do you do that if you're not going to discuss real-life challenges and problems? So it was not, contrary to what some very biased senior counsels declare in the court, it was not at all that we targeted the judiciary. We did this with other institutions as well. We did this with the parliament. For example, when we came to the parliament, we mentioned that a large number of members of parliament in India have criminal cases against them. That is a challenge. It doesn't mean if you state that as you are disrespecting the institution. It's a real life problem. And it's a serious problem that the country has been facing and continues to face. We had statistics from official sources. Of course, all our sources are official sources or absolutely confirmed, verified sources. We gave statistics on the number of parliamentary sessions lost over a certain number of years. And we used statistics from, I think, one of our past vice presidents. He himself was concerned and gave those statistics in Parliament. And we explained that according to the official explanation, it's about heated discussions, it's about walkouts, it's about the use of unparliamentary language, etc., etc. Now, when you say that, you are simply highlighting a real-life situation, and then you are engaging the student, trusting the student that he or she will be bright enough to grasp the problem and start thinking about it. Otherwise, what are we saying? Are we saying that these issues should only be resolved in the street with people, younger or older, throwing stones or using some violent means to express this frustration in them? If you take it right from the beginning with children of mature age, then precisely you are not only allowing the steam to be let out, but you are also trusting their thought process and giving them this sense of responsibility that they will, when they grow up, if they are to be responsible citizens, again, another constant mandate of NEP and NCFSE, that we have to prepare the students to be responsible citizens of the 21st century. You're giving them a sign of trust that we can discuss these real life issues together And when you become adult, maybe you can do something about them. And in fact, one of our senior counsels last Friday in court, he was a senior counsel for Mr. Alok Prasannakumar. He explained to the court, he said, look, we have to accept that there are shortcomings in our institutions. We have to discuss them warts and all. I'm repeating his exact words. We have to discuss them warts and all. Let us do this with our students. And, maybe they will be able in future to resolve some of these challenges. Let us not forget that the challenges which affect all these institutions in India and in many parts of the world, of course, they are not from today, they are not from yesterday. Many of them have deep antecedents and deep roots. So unless we analyze all that, we'll never be able to solve them. That's a fairly longish answer, please excuse me.
Yeah, so during the period of the ban, how did it affect your academic work and engagement with the institutions like NCRT? And how do you view NCRT's response to the controversy that followed?
Very briefly, I had left IIT Gandhinagar a year ago, actually in January, February of last year, but I was still guest professor, which means I could visit once in a while. That contract was instantly terminated after the March 11 order. And I was not consulted. There was no discussion with me. It was an immediate discussion made actually with some kind of indecent haste because they rushed to the media to declare loud and clear that they had no longer any association with me anymore, even though I had pioneered a lot of initiatives which are well known at IIT Gandhinagar. So fine, let it be. That's their prerogative, and I'm not discussing that. As far as NCERT is concerned, we were disappointed. First of all, because they did not explain to the court the entire process. And had we together, NCERT, those involved in the preparation of the textbooks, members and chairs of the two overarching committees, what people don't know is that NCERT does not decide the content. The content is prepared and finalized, this is the official word, by two overarching committees. One is called NSTC, National Syllabus and Teaching Learning Material Committee. It's a long title, with two co-chairs, Professor M.C. Pant and Professor Manjul Bhargava. And the other is National Oversight Committee, chaired by Professor Jagbir Singh, which is tasked to ensure that the textbooks are within the spirit and letter of the NEP 2020. So these are the two overarching committees which actually finalize and tell NCERT, these chapters are fine, or this textbook is fine, you go ahead and publish. Now, if we all together, these two committees, especially represented by their respective chairs and their leading members, perhaps active members, because there were also lots of inactive members in these committees, and the textbook development team and myself as the chair of the curricular area group for social science, if we together had approached the Supreme Court and said, look, we understand that your feelings are hurt, but allow us to explain the context, why this is done, why this is not at all exclusive to the judiciary, why this is not derogatory to the judiciary, which actually is portrayed in a positive light in that particular chapter, and why this is in keeping with the NEP 2020 and NCFSE. If we had explained all this calmly and together to the Supreme Court bench, I'm quite sure that the March 11 order would not have been deemed necessary.
So the court has still maintained that the chapter's contents were wholly undesirable. How do you respond to this continued observation?
In our affidavits, which we filed on April 4, if I remember right, in our affidavits, we respectfully disagreed with these assertions of the Supreme Court bench. We do not accept that there is anything fundamentally objectionable. Perhaps a few sentences could have been worded differently. The title of that particular subsection, which is corruption in the judiciary, could have been worded differently, but essentially the content is correct. We stand by it. It is again in keeping with these two foundational documents I have referred to. And the tone, which many readers, many authors of articles in the media after the March 11 order in particular, even before, some of them written by legal luminaries, there was a very wide consensus that there was nothing of objectionable in the chapter. So if the Supreme Court bench continues to feel so, there's nothing much we can say except that we respectfully disagree.
So after everything that happened, do you feel there's anything you would change in the chapter, sir?
Well, as I've just said, in fact, I've already answered this. There could have been some better choice of words here and there in the particular chapter, but nothing fundamentally to be changed, because all our data was official data submitted to the parliament or to some, it was part of some administrative commissions, which, for example, recorded number of complaints against judges. And we used primarily statements by judges, former justices, former Chief Justice of India, another former justice, K.S. Singh, and so on. And therefore, we were very careful to use only authentic sources. And we did not use them with any derogatory intention. And this was accepted by the Supreme Court in its latest order.
At the time of writing, did you imagine the chapter would invite this level of scrutiny?
No, not at all. Absolutely not, because I was rather expecting some controversies about, a historical chapter of history, which is usually what the media in particular would immediately target. They would immediately try to kick up some controversies about the chapters on history, which is very easy to do because, as I've very often said, in social science and history and culture more particularly, it's almost impossible to write in a way that will never invite controversy, unless you're going to be super boring, super bland, super sanitized, and then you will be, of course, doing an injustice to the students. Otherwise, because these social science, and if I write a textbook on physical education, maybe some parts could be controversial. Why not? It can happen. Or if I write on vocational education or mathematics, it's not so likely that there will be controversies. Why is social science almost always triggering controversies? And please note, I've been observing textbooks in India since the 1990s. And I can assure you, I've accumulated a lot of papers. I can assure you that controversies about social science started in India in the 1970s. Textbook published under the Morarji Desai government invited a whole lot of controversies. And then as the governments kept changing, textbooks kept changing, and more controversies will continue. So, this school of thought, that school of thought, and so on. So therefore, it's nothing new. And I did expect some on chapters of history or culture, but I certainly did not expect anything about this particular chapter.
Believe after this episode raises broader concerns about academic freedom in India, and if yes, in what ways?
So many observers of what happened as the aftermath of the two Supreme Court orders, which is one of February 26, and then the other of March 11. If you read them together, many writers of the articles that I mentioned earlier, for example, commentators on the whole process, the judicial process, and then the impact of those orders on academic freedom and on, more particularly, on the writing of textbooks. Many of these observers use the phrase chilling effect. This was in editorials in the media. I've seen this phrase very often. And definitely what the Supreme Court bench has done will have a chilling effect on present and future textbook writers. They will not feel so free to innovate, to create. And creativity and innovation are absolutely essential if we want to create a new generation of textbook. You know, the establishment has been saying very loudly for the past several years now that NEP 2020 was going to introduce a revolution in school education in India. This was the official voice again and again, that there would be a revolution brought about by NEP 2020. How are you going to have a revolution if the textbooks are falling back to the old way of doing textbooks, where you are going to be scared at every single sentence of what, you know, objections people might be raising? You can't. Your hands will be tied. So this chilling effect, let us hope that this is not going to be something permanent. But definitely, even though the Supreme Court said at some point in his earliest order, Supreme Court said that it didn't want to infringe on academic freedom, indirectly, the orders it passed will have an intimidating effect. And therefore, this is something that the, you know, academic community needs to discuss. I know that there have been already protests, polite protests in the media. I noticed a letter that over 50 academics from all over India sent to the President of India. And this is one of the issues that they raised. So this is something that we will have to live with, and it's for the, you know, present and future textbook writers to reflect upon. I would like to close with one important thought, which actually is an afterthought. You know, in India, in school education in India, unfortunately, we have been obsessed with textbooks. And this is a very sad development, which continues to have a crippling effect on the minds of the students. What I mean to say is that, as NCFSE itself mentioned somewhere, our education is textbook-centric. In advanced countries, textbooks are never used in classrooms. Textbooks are there only for supplementary reading at home. This question of bringing textbooks to the classroom never occurs. And, you know, we've been debating so much, how are we going to reduce the weight that children have to carry to school because of all these textbooks of all disciplines they have to carry? It's actually a false question. The correct question is, how do we reduce the presence of textbooks in the classroom? And for that, it's primarily, and it's going to have to be, of course, a gradual transition. But primarily, the number one challenge is, how do we train teachers in such a way that they do their own research and they prepare their own material? That is the real question. In many advanced countries, for example, my schooling took place in France in the 1960s or something. Now, I cannot remember a single teacher at school asking us to bring the textbooks to the classroom and asking us to open the textbook on a certain page and then reading together that particular page. No, the teachers would come with their own notes, and the textbook was used in the evening when we were revising. Then we would go to the textbook. Now, for this to happen in India, many challenges have to be overcome. First of all, the challenge, as I said, that the teachers have to be ready to do their own research. The average teacher in India today is absolutely not ready for this. And secondly, we need to change the whole atmosphere of the classroom. We need to engage the student in discussions, in debates, which is what NEP 2020 is talking about. So we need to reorient, and of course, we need to open the range of materials available. So there's been a lot of talk about introducing digital material, but more than half of our schools in India still do not have access to the internet. So the use of digital material is going to take a lot of time. So therefore, because teachers are not ready and because schools' infrastructure remains very poor in India, the textbook, unfortunately, remains an essential instrument. There are many schools in distant rural areas where the textbook is still the sole instrument of teaching and learning. But that is a very unfortunate situation. Unless we keep this word unfortunate present to our minds when we describe the present system of schooling and this obsession with textbooks, we will not progress. And NEP 2020 will remain a distant dream. This is my conclusion.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for putting these very pertinent questions to me. Thank you.
Thank you.